I don't love my fiancé, and I resent that we have to get married, but I will probably never leave her. In October of 1999, my friend Natalie got hit by a double-decker bus right after our school's Halloween disco. She just walked outside, stepped off the curb, and then splat. Two girls dressed as Posh and Baby Spice got sprayed from head to toe in juicy blood. All the teachers and chaperones came sprinting out of the assembly hall, still in their costumes, and screamed for the kids to look away. But we'd already soaked up an eyeful of poor Natalie's innards. It took 2 paramedics 3 hours to scrap all the guts off the asphalt. 26 years after the plaque commemorating Nat's accident went up, I found myself in the corner of a cozy Italian restaurant, waiting on the first girl I ever kissed, Cassandra Russell. As the gorgeous brunette strolled through the front entrance, a hush fell over the room. 3 waiters, along with 2 male patrons seated near the door, clamored to take her coat. You couldn't blame them either. Cass didn't look like Quasimodo's kid sister anymore. Somebody had replaced the awkward, scrawny farm girl I remembered with a beauty queen. Maybe our deal wasn't the noose I'd always thought it to be. She crossed the room in elegant strides, her chestnut locks tossing playfully from one shoulder to the other. In the booths, other customers averted their gaze or focused on their menus. "Alan," the beautiful lady said. Her purple dress made me feel inadequate in my wrinkled shirt. I shook myself alert, greeted her with a hug. "Cassandra, it's good to see you. And you." My hands fumbled to slide out her chair. She made herself comfortable, setting her purse on the window ledge beside our table. "So, how have you been?" she asked. "Well, work's been a real firefight, but other than that, fantastic. I'll bet. Must be rough being the next Bill Gates. I saw you gave a speech at some fancy conference in Vegas last year." "It's not as glamorous as it sounds," I said, all bashful. A blonde waitress with her hair pulled into a bun barely glanced up from her notepad as she jotted down our drinks order, smiling the entire time. Cass and I agreed to split a bottle of Brunello di Montalcino, then made idle chit-chat about the brutal weather until the wine arrived. The waitress's trembling hand almost missed the glass as she poured. I remember thinking it must have been her first ever shift. "Cheers," I said to Cass, who glared at the nervous girl, her disdain obvious. Those fizzy bubbles melted in my mouth, fruity, crisp, delicious. Portraits of Italian celebrities and landmarks decorated the exposed brick walls, and red and white cloths covered the tables. A thick aroma of garlic and baking bread made my stomach rumble, already anticipating a nice hot meal. Cassandra set her glass down on the table. "So, what brought you back to the arse end of nowhere after all this time? Next to London, Ashenville must feel like an alien planet." "I'm not sure. A few weeks ago, I just started feeling homesick. I mean, London's great, but I guess I wanted to come back where everybody gets on like old pals, even if they're not." "And are people as friendly as you remember?" "Not really. It feels like I've become an outsider in the time I've been away." "How do you mean?" she asked. "Everyone's just been a bit short with me. It's hard to get a conversation going. Like last week, I was coming out of White's Tavern and saw a crowd cheering on this drunk idiot who'd climbed up on a phone booth and started stripping. I asked one lady what was going on, but she just made a face and backed away from me like I had the plague." "What did she look like? Did she have a scar here?" With her forefinger, Cass drew a horizontal line down her left cheek. "I bet she did. I've had problems with that one before." I chuckled. "See? That's exactly my point. In London, I only knew my neighbors' names because their posts got mixed in with mine. Here, I say one woman acted mildly standoffish and you knew exactly who I meant." As we flicked through our menus, I told Cass I'd already started renovations on my mom's old house. "So what about you?" I asked. "Did you ever get away from this place like we always said we would?" "Not really. With Mom being sick for so long, I only ever slipped off 2 or 3 times. She always spat raw fury when I got back. There was a short, uncomfortable silence. I was really sorry to hear about her accident, I said finally. That's okay. She was asking for trouble working the combine harvester at her age. Asheville is a small, ugly town, comprised of 3 streets surrounded by bumpy dirt roads and rolling green hills. Cassandra grew up in a crooked shack with her mom and their 5 cats. If the old recluse walked into a store along the high street, merchants straightened their spines and addressed her as ma'am. She sent her only daughter to school in buttoned-down plaid and checkered skirts that covered the ankles. So at school, the other kids taunted Cass over her fashion victim outcast status. People whispered about that family, none of it flattering. The waitress returned for our orders, her mouth still pinned up at both sides. I went with a rustica picante with a side of cheesy garlic bread, whereas Cass settled on a prawn cavatelli. Outside, wet car tires hissed. Together we glanced out the window, beyond which a teenage boy had come within inches of getting struck by a silver Volvo. Heavy raindrops pounded down in drenching sheets and bounced off the road, creating a low mist that limited visibility. As the lucky kid circled the hood, one hand raised in apology, images of Natalie's intestines spread out across 20 meters of asphalt flashed before my eyes. I shook the image away. So tell me about London, Cassandra said. There isn't much to tell. After uni, I got a job in IT. Didn't you do an event management thingy? An app, yeah. I had a 20-person team until the pandemic wiped us out. After that, I started contracting. Now I work remotely. Must have been tough walking away from that life. One minute you've got a fancy career and a beautiful fiancé, and you're in the village of the damned. Some wine almost slid down the wrong pipe. I thumped my chest. How'd you know I got engaged? Small town, remember? I'm pretty sure your mom mentioned it at the salon, before the stroke. My mouth itched for more alcohol, so I took a generous swig. What about you? How have you been keeping? Oh, same old, same old. Looking after the sheep, taking care of the farm. I put up a new sign that says strawberries for sale, £1 50 per kilo, so a lot of out-of-towners stop by. Do you still make those? A shudder ran down my spine. Puppets? Dolls? Sometimes. Anything else I can get for you? The waitress asked as she arrived with our meal, her voice quivering. No, this is fine. Cass dismissed her with a flick of her hand. Our waitress backstepped away, still doing her best imitation of a Cheshire cat. I found myself irritated with my date for acting so rude, so condescending. The warm cheese from the garlic bread clung stubbornly to the corners of my mouth, and the rustica picante was the perfect mix of hot and spicy textured dough like a tongue massage. While we ate, our conversation circled around former acquaintances, old friends, ex-teachers, elderly neighbors. Very little had changed since I moved away, except an occasional farm accident here and there. 3 tables over, a man stood so suddenly that his chair toppled backward. His hands clamped around his throat, his face turning from purple to red. I would have rushed to help, except my thoughts circled toward my ex-fiancée, Ciara. She and I had been scuba diving off the coast of Spain when a yacht sped by overhead, becoming entangled with her breathing apparatus. Like the gagging man, she'd pawed her own throat, her body twisting in every direction underwater. Even through the face mask, I could see the terror in her eyes. We had 0 chance of reaching the shore in time. Back in the restaurant, a meatball launched from the man's mouth and splattered across his table. What struck me as odd, though, was how around the room patrons only passively watched the scene unfold and then returned to their meals without a single word. The man dabbed his chin clean and did a lap of the room, mumbling, "Sorry for causing a fuss." "So sorry, sorry." Beside our table he said, "Dreadfully sorry, folks. Hope I didn't ruin your evening." His strained smile fell several notches short of genuine. Cass dismissed him with a gesture. "Chew your food properly next time." Shocked at her reaction, I said, "Don't be daft. There's no need to apologize." "Of course," he interrupted. With that, he hurried through the door. A pang of unease ran along my spine. Why apologize? And did I detect a note of fear in his voice? Everything had felt all out of whack since I arrived, although I couldn't place my finger on why quite yet. "Alan?" Cassandra said. My eyes flicked toward her. "I'm sorry?" I said, "Does this song bring back memories?" Genie in a Bottle played through a speaker in the ceiling, one of several tracks that blared on repeat at our Halloween disco. "Of course. You were an old-timey debutante. I was Captain Scarlet." Her left arm slumped across the back of her chair. "You know, you were the first boy I ever kissed." Now, basking in the memory, I grinned. In truth, that kiss had been a dare. Back then, Cass stalked me like a serial killer, and she'd arrived at the disco dressed as a 1920s-style socialite, which meant she stuck out amongst the sea of Obi-Wan Kenobis and Britney Spears wannabes, so my buddies goaded me into planting one on her as a joke. "And you were the first girl I ever kissed," I replied. She wrinkled her nose. "Then you marched across the dance floor and kissed Natalie right after." What can I say? You do dumb things at that age, especially under pressure from your mates. The second Cassandra excused herself and disappeared into the dance floor. My buddies came over and thumped me on the back, hyping me up. "Okay, now kiss Natalie," Gavin said. Nat went dressed as the Pink Power Ranger. Because I refused, they made chicken noises, steadily growing louder and more obnoxious, until I walked up to Natalie, asked for a kiss, and then planted one on her. Only after a spirited round of tonsil hockey did I notice the wide eyes locked on us. Standing amongst my friends, Cass gritted her jaw, tight, 2 Freddo bars in hand. She'd bought them for us using her pocket money. If you've ever wondered who clean up in a brawl, a debutante or a Power Ranger, the answer is the debutante. It took 3 of my buddies, along with our vice principal, to wrestle Nat free from that headlock. A tangle of her hair came away in Cass's closed fist. Her mother must have exploded when she heard what happened because Cass didn't leave her house for 2 weeks afterwards. Back in the present day, I said, I was going to remember around that part. My date shot me a wry, playful look. What can I say? I was amped up on fizzy sticks and Pepsi, and I was dressed as Captain Scarlet. Do you know what kind of confidence boost that gives a young boy? You know you never actually apologized for that. I grabbed the wine, topped up our glasses, and said, You're right. Cassandra Russell, I'm sorry. To forgiveness? We toasted. Still, deep in thought, I stared out the window. In the years following the disco, Cassandra and I avoided dating publicly for 2 reasons. First, I didn't want people to see me hold hands with the teenage girl who put on Sunday school puppet shows that would make Stephen King squirm, and second, her mother would have given her 20 lashings. In private, though, we rolled around in the hay in her family's barn, or took midnight dips by the quarry. The waitress returned our empty plates. Should I get you 2 a dessert menu? She asked with a gulp. I said to Cass, What say we split a fudge cake? Sounds good. While we waited, hands were shaken and farewells exchanged. Patrons gathered their coats, and purses and filtered toward the exit, subtly watching us from the corner of their eyes along the way. What did they find so fascinating? Was I simply the new guy in a gossip-starved town? I felt another pang of unease. It was like I'd found myself trapped in an episode of The Twilight Zone. Maybe I just needed time to adjust to that intimate, small-town feel. By the time dessert arrived, the lobby had cleared out except for us. The moist cake pushed me over the edge. As we savored those final few bites, chairs got turned up onto tables, counters were wiped down. "How was it?" the waitress asked, unable to keep the wobble out of her voice. "Perfect," I said. "Anything else I can get for you?" "Just the bill." As she reached for the plates, her elbow brushed my glass, spilling red wine across my lap. I stood so suddenly I bumped the table. "I am so sorry. I'm a complete jinx." The waitress patted my midsection with a rag, hysterical now. "It's fine," I chuckled. With a real cutting edge to her voice, Cassandra said, "No, it is not fine." The waitress flinched, like a disobedient puppy scolded by its master. "What kind of idiots are they hiring around here? You've completely ruined our evening." The blonde woman stammered, her eyes pooling with tears. "Please, I... Cass, it was an honest mistake," I said, and then handed the waitress her rag. "The meal was delicious. Thank you." She stood there, frozen on the spot, until two other waiters rushed over and steered her away by linking arms while a third gathered our plates, muttering, "Sorry." Her volatile reaction brought my teenage years crashing back. By the time I started applying for universities, I discovered the climate inside my secret girlfriend was an approaching tornado, in that there wasn't much you could do to avoid it besides batten down the hatches and pray your luck held out. If a female member of my friend group offered me a cigarette light, Cass might have jumped her the next day. Or whenever a local teen made a crack about her pariah status, she'd fly off in a wild fury, tackling them to the ground and clawing at their face. In truth, I'd been grateful when our last summer together rolled around. Cassandra sobbed into my shoulder, dismayed about how she'd spend the rest of her life trapped under mother's thumb, alone. "She'll never let me leave," she kept saying. "It's all right for you heading off to university, but I'm going to be stuck here taking care of that old bat forever." Her bawling wrenched my insides, so to soften the blow I said, "Hey, how about if we both make it to 35 and are still single, we get hitched?" She glanced up at me, her cheeks wet with tears. "What?" "Well, we'll be fully grown. It's not like she'll be able to stop us." To prove my commitment, I even made a pinky promise. What harm could it have done? A stud like me would have zero problems finding love in the big city. I'd be married long before my 30s reared their ugly head, no question. It turned out, finding love wasn't difficult. Keeping a partner alive is the real trick. My first serious girlfriend, Alex, burned to death inside her apartment 2 days after our 3-year anniversary. Then Charania had her rock climbing mishap, and we've already covered the Spanish scuba incident. I found myself a bachelor laden with the trauma of deceased ex-partners. So I moved home 2 weeks before my 35th birthday. I swear, you'd have thought I'd been cursed. Is it any wonder I left those bitter memories behind? A letter was already waiting for me back home. Cassandra wanted to know whether I'd join her for dinner. Painfully aware of our deal, my immediate reaction was a swift no way. Yet soon, this strange urge to see her again overcame me, and I found myself agreeing. Oh, sure, Cass had blossomed into a beauty queen, but 2 decades after we split, there she was following in her mother's footsteps, picking pointless fights. Over by the front entrance, our waitress sobbed into her hands, while 2 co-workers attempted to console her. What kind of reaction was that? Throughout our teenage years, locals teased and gawked at Cass. Now you'd think she had them held up at gunpoint. Cassandra's finger circled the outer edge of her wine glass. So, Alan, do you remember when we were 17 and— The deal? I interrupted. She shrugged. It's just, I'm single. You're single. Things haven't worked out for either of us, so I thought maybe— Her voice trailed off there. I rubbed my neck. So, look, about that— Her fist slammed against the table. I knew it. You never meant to keep your promise, did you? Across the room, the staff made a conscious effort to not look in our direction. Even still, I could have crawled beneath my chair and died from embarrassment. My mouth fumbled for the right words. It's not that. It's just, we were kids. It was all bullshit then, she shouted, her brow darkening. Experience told me the fury would soon arrive. No, all I'm saying is, I needed another carrot on a stick, at least until I could mount an escape. Let's try dating first. You've changed. I've changed. And let's face it, we never had a conventional relationship. So let's take things slow and enjoy it without any extra pressure. She stared at me, as though debating whether this sentiment sounded genuine. You aren't just trying to weasel out of our deal? Don't be daft. She took a slow, steady breath. Okay. Great. Come on, I'll order you a taxi. I bit down on the words, and then block your number. Cassandra's hand shot out, wrapped around my shirt collar, and pulled away a stray blonde hair. She studied it for a moment before excusing herself to the bathroom. With her gone, I dropped a generous tip onto the table. By the front entrance, I pulled on my coat, and as I did, the waitress charged over and clasped my hands. Please, she said through tears. You'll speak to her, right? Explain it was an accident. Please. Her coworker made a quick apology and then dragged her away, whispering, Shut the hell up. Do you want to make it worse? The remaining staff pretended not to notice me. I planted myself on a stool beside the counter. Sweat broke out on the forehead of a bartender with another forced smile. Hope you had a nice evening, sir. Good luck, he said, with extra emphasis on the good luck. Now this sense of unease had graduated to downright terror. Dark storm clouds had hung over Ashenville since I arrived back. But why? With a glance around, I leaned in close. Hey, buddy, answer me this. The lady I'm with, is she a bit difficult? It's like everyone's walking on eggshells around us. There's something I should know? He said, I don't know what you mean. Cassandra's a delight. He checked the room, leaned forward, and lowered his voice, as though terrified of being overheard. Be careful, mate. She lost the plot when her mom died. People say she made her do it. Now we're all stuck here. She's taken over. A few folks tried to stop her, but it didn't work out so well for them. It's like she's always 10 steps ahead. Then last week, she started telling people she'd be getting engaged soon. We thought she'd snapped until you arrived. Do yourself a favor. Keep her happy. To the room, he announced, "We hope you both come back soon, right, folks?" Around me, a chorus of agreement went up. I was surrounded by strained smiles. The bartender refused to say another word on the subject, and before I could really probe him, Cassandra arrived back. Future husband. Lost the plot. What the hell did this all mean? Either way, from all the frightened expressions, you could tell nobody would dare say another word, not with Cassandra within earshot. I needed to get her home, and then work out the rest later. The staff held the door open and followed us outside, where my date and I sheltered from the rain under an awning. The waitress, whose balls had tapered off into a sniffle, unfolded an umbrella and bid farewell to her co-workers, and then shuffled across the street, almost with a sense of resignation. Straight away, car brakes screeched. Rainwater sprayed up in 2 hissing columns. I couldn't make out what happened through the tsunami until a Vauxhall skidded to a halt. The waitress landed 20 meters from where she stepped off the curb, her face smeared with blood already diluting under the pounding rain. As I charged into the storm, several people screamed. Her lower half sat a quarter turn to the left, and there was a long gash along her neck, through which exposed meat glistened like prime steak. The rustica picante almost slid up my throat. I looked over at the other waiters, each rooted on the spot, and yelled, "Somebody call an ambulance," but nobody rushed to help, didn't even move. They just looked at Cass, who stood sheltered by the awning, grinning away. In her left hand, she held one of her dolls, those silly, hand-stitched dolls she loved so much. Cass beckoned me forward with her finger. The bartender's eyes locked on mine, and then he made a go-on gesture with his chin. As my eyes whipped between the dying waitress and the first girl I ever kissed, I became painfully aware of why the locals had acted so weird around me, of why I'd been so unlucky in love these past 20 years. And so, like a puppet on a string, I forced a smile, walked up to my date, my future fiancé, and pulled her in for a warm embrace. And as I held her, the only thing running through my mind was, how long have I got before she starts hinting at an engagement?